Hello, my name is Justin Bright, and welcome to Kerbal Space Program version 1.2.2, in which I am attempting to make Kerbals a multiplanetary species. And if you recall, in the previous episode, I was launching some hardware out to Minmus to start building the Minmus shipyards, as I'm calling it. So we are carrying on with that, and in this episode we have a couple more pieces that actually need to come out. So there's some stuff that I forgot to send that I need to get out there as well, and this is the last piece that we had in orbit, but I took a little break because it was we were in the dark side, so I didn't want to land more stuff while it was dark. So now we are getting right back to it, and this is the Minmus colony box. So for each of the bases that I've built so far, there's been something like this where I have just one gigantic KIS container absolutely full of all the little bits and pieces that I need. Unfortunately, knowing from the future, there's stuff that's missing, so that's not wonderful, but we'll get to that later on when that becomes relevant. But for now, we are bringing down this big and monstrous thing, which is using the Honey Badger VTOL engines as I use with pretty much everything, because they're kind of broken. They're a little bit overpowered, I would say. Like, they're 400 second, I think, ISP, really strong thrust, and in that VTOL orientation. So it makes it incredibly simple to do exactly what I have here, where we have these big barbell landers that I'm building and sending out. So yeah, we're landing this one, and this has getting a little laggy as we're coming into the physics bubble. That's exciting. But yeah, we have just a couple more pieces, and just as a little refresher, this is intended to be the base where I'm able to build stuff finally. Like, Minmus Shipyards is being called that for a reason. I'm having a little bit of trouble deciding whether I want to stick with the bundled ground construction mod that Rover Dude very recently integrated along with the other mod maker Alista. So I'm having a hard time deciding if I want to stick with that or if I want to build extraplanetary launch pads back into my save. The downside of extraplanetary launch pads is I have, now I have 2 construction mods, and I have a whole bunch of extra parts, and I think they have extra resources and all that other stuff. The upside is I can actually build completely from scratch in situ, because what I'm finding out after having played with it a little bit, ground construction requires that you build these things called DIY kits, which you have to put together in the VAB right now. I don't think there's any way to actually construct them yet. So that's the downside of just using ground construction. I'd be happy to just use that, but it sounds like I'm going to have to figure out a good way to either send out a whole bunch of that in bulk, a bunch of DIY kits in bulk, or I'm going to have to figure out another mod configuration to make this work. So meanwhile, back to our the colony box that has landed. I'm finding out now that those gigantic wheels, they don't turn. I don't know. I mean, I thought that all wheels could steer. I was not actually aware that there were wheels that existed that did not have any capacity whatsoever for steering. I thought that maybe, like, even though it had those big bars on the top and all the little, like, servos that lead down into them, I figured that maybe it would like hydraulically flex or something and allow the thing to rotate, but I don't know. I'm either doing something terribly wrong or those wheels just don't turn, so I guess we'll have to figure something out. Well, what we're figuring out, I think, is that I couldn't figure out how to make it, I could not figure out how to make the wheels turn, but we have jets, we have fuel, we could lift this thing up and just rotate it using our RCS, so let's just do that. Yeah, so anytime I need to turn this thing, I just pick it up, throw it into the air, rotate it around using its RCS, and bring it back down. And I still have plenty of fuel to do that pretty much as many times as I need to. I don't think this takes all that much in the way of fuel, so that is going to be no problem at all. Alright, so let's just set this down, and then bonk. Ooh, God, this thing is so heavy. This thing is 160 tons, you know, set down. This is after it's landed on Minmus. 160 tons. That's a pretty enormous payload. So this thing does not exactly respond quickly or, you know, in any kind of agile fashion. But that's fine. We don't need it to do anything. We don't need it to do any tricks. We don't need it to get anywhere. I just have those instead of landing legs so that I can move it around a little bit and make my life a little bit easier as far as getting stuff out of the KIS container, and also making sure that the very precise position of the material kits is wherever I need it to be. So that is all good. We should be fine with that. All right, so we are rolling up into position. And while we get that down, let's very rapidly go to the saga of the Hulk Constructor Lander. So this thing had fallen over, but I had managed to get it flipped up into the air and landed on its belly with the legs put away. And then it rises. Yes, I spent something like 20-30 minutes, a pretty significant amount of time, fussing around with the servos and learning exactly what every joint on here is so that I could, and also figuring out how to use the free and gold settings on the servo controller so that I could actually just have this thing pick itself up with its own two arms. Its own weird Scorpio arms, but yeah, so I have this thing pick itself up and, whoops, like I said, this was a learning process. But I figured that there was no reason why this thing should not be able to lift itself up off of the ground. And so I did. And so, as you can see, I was able to finally pick itself up just enough so that I'm able to get the wheels down underneath it. And that is really the part that's important. See, because the issues that I'm having with this is if you use something that moves, like a servo or infernal robotics or things like that, wheels that extend, legs that extend, any even like cargo bay doors, service bay doors, that sort of thing. Anything that moves like that, it doesn't really work with the physics quite right. So you can do things like launch yourself into the air hundreds of yards and just flip yourself up no matter how heavy the rover is. It's also the thing that allows like the servos to work to pick this vehicle up regardless of how heavy it is, because you'll notice that there's no like lift strength. It just is what it is, whatever is programmed in. It moves a certain number of degrees or a certain number of meters, and that's just, it's just exactly how it goes. But in any case, as you can see, I'm starting to kind of figure out these different joints here, and we are trying to get this so that I can just push that straight. Oops, I want to make sure to do them both just about simultaneously. Sometimes the rotation feels a little strange, and that's probably from the way that I have these attached. Like, I didn't put, they're not mirrored or like radial symmetry or anything like that. I think they're just individually stuck on. Ooh, drifting to one side, picking up some phantom movement. Keep that in mind. But yeah, so it's a little bit strange, but this is kind of what you have to do as far as, this thing being able to pick itself up, because it's very easy to find issues with the physics where you're able to launch yourself hugely into the air, and it's just such a problem getting this thing stood back up once it falls over. And of course, every time that you load in, it seems that the physics easing pops it into the air because it forgets exactly where it is on the ground or something like that. But you know, is what it is, and we are just about there. I am just very carefully moving both of them now to get this thing pushed up. And that looks good. All right, zero it out and put down those front legs and the side legs. All right, success. This thing has picked itself up, and then, oh, you're kidding me. Okay. Oh, I was going to be so mad. All right, stow. And stow. Oh, now what? Are we sliding now? Okay, moving right along. I had to deal with a small Phantom Forces issue, but we are now recovered, and I'm yanking out the rock to make this thing actually turn and handle a little bit better, because we are sending it down about 9 kilometers to the site of Minty Station. Or not Minty Station. Minty Station is where we're coming from. We are heading to the Minmus shipyards, which is the place where I'm going to be using this to assist with a lot of the assembly. I'm hoping that there's not a whole lot of issue with using Kerbal Attachment System to move components around, because I kind of sent everything up in a giant lump, you know. I sent up 3 or 4 different conglomerations of those, just 3.75 meter Tundra modules, just kind of stuck together with cradles underneath, which is, I mean, it works, I guess, so that's just kind of the best way to get things out as far as I can tell. All right, so we are rolling on down the hill. And as I was saying, it's easy to just stick those 3.75 meter modules together to get things out on a rocket in, you know, a vaguely rocket-shaped package, but it requires you use those VTOLs. It requires and it requires sending things in separate packages that look nothing like what it's going to look like when you actually assemble it. It requires everything to be done in situ, which can be challenging with the stock configuration of how Kerbal Attachment System and Kerbal Inventory System work, and the way that you can actually pick up and move and place things. Thankfully, the construction set from Rover Dude allows you to increase the power and range of your Kerbal Attachment System pick up and move operations. All right, so we are getting down to the hill, and we are going to remove some of the ballast in the back to make sure that when we hit this lip here, and donk. Yeah, physics doesn't work quite the way you'd expect. Like, there's no shocks or anything. You just kind of hit, and then that's just, you know, the game just keeps you moving straight along like, yep, this is fine. This is what's happening. But anyways, with it only took me a couple dozen tries, but we are here now at the site of the Minmus shipyards with our Hulk Constructor lander. The next piece we need, do a little burnout to kill our velocity, and we are all set up and ready to do our construction. So as you can see, we have the L1, L2, and L3 modules, 3 different segments, the big 3.75 meter and 2.5 meter segments. We have our colony box, and we have the lander with our intrepid Kerbonauts that are going to be actually doing the construction. And so that's the way we came. That was the rover trip that we just took. Like I said, it took me a couple of tries. I had to reload a few times, stop and save, and then go a little bit further, and I didn't think that was terribly interesting, something that you guys would find fun to watch. So we will just carry on from here. Alright, I wish I could say that that was all we needed and we could actually start the construction, but I forgot a bunch of stuff. As I was actually going into the planning phase of like figuring out the literal logistics of like, okay, where do I want this piece? Where do I want that piece there? And well, I'm going to want to make sure that this goes over here. I started thinking about trying to organize them, the individual modules by their function. Like I wanted the Kerbitat and the agriculture to be kind of close together but not connected, and I wanted all of the industrial refineries and the assemblies to be close together, and I wanted the inflatable logistics modules to have their own little area and so forth. So as I started to think and plan through that, I realized, oh, I don't actually have an agricultural module here. nor do I have a Curbitat, like a small Curbitat that I can attach the inflatable modules to. And I also don't have any lights. And with that, my plans changed a little bit, so I needed to send up a couple other pieces as well, and that is what you are seeing now. We are sending up just a handful of different modules. As you can see, there's the Duna Agriculture, the Duna Habitation module, and then a multi-hub that I'm using both as a structural piece, and it's also full of stuff. Because in a fairly recent patch, Rover Dude actually included Kerbal Inventory System space inside those pieces, which is, I don't know, I think that's pretty great. It allows me to, you know, double up on the functionality of those things. Alright, so we are burning up a little bit here, but let's just skip right ahead. I can assure you that everything went just fine. But I forgot not one thing, but two things. This is actually a set of drillers and an assembly workshop that I had planned to send up the entire time, but it wasn't conveniently named an L1, L2, L3. This was Minmus Shipyard Drillers. So I forgot about it entirely. But we're sending it now. And it's on a Mars cryogenic stage, which are those engines that I don't think I can shut up about. I probably talked about this last time as well, but it's a really nice engine. I really quite like it. That's one of the things that I actually quite enjoy about playing Kerbal Space Program and playing through Career. And one of the reasons why I don't like Sandbox quite as much is because I get the chance to, you know, unlock and play with new engines, and like, oh, and then I get this thing after I get this science, and oh, well, I've been using this, and this is kind of junky, but oh man, in another level I can use this thing, and it's all very exciting. So I've been gushing about these because I haven't had much chance to use them before this game, so I'm really quite enjoying them for pretty much every application, both as lifters and as interplanetary engines, and the fact that you can spring for tanks that cryogenically protect the propellants, or you can just leave them in regular tanks that boil off for much cheaper and smaller electricity cost, gives it some really neat flexibility and strategy. Anyways, this thing also made it to orbit just fine. Let's just double check on everything in here. Want to get the antenna. Oh, that's right. I actually have to knock off the fairing first. Womp womp. Deploy. Huzzah. Beautiful thing. We'll see it on Minmus. And here it is coming in on Minmus. Well, this is the first thing that I sent. This is the additional modules. Anyways, I do apologize for the dark landing here. I was really intending not to do that, but I wasn't sure that this thing was actually going to make it if I tried to put it into orbit. I had planned on this being one of those, like, straight down, like, you go directly into your landing, you don't circularize, you go straight from hyperbolic trajectory into a landing, but it was getting dark at the time, and I wasn't sure that I was going to be able to go back on my original plans and like change my trajectory into one where I could capture successfully and then get into a regular orbit and then go into a landing later. I actually, looking at my fuel, I have no real excuse. I thought I could make it, but as you can see, I'm only 2.3 kilometers from the surface, and that is when the shadow fell over me where I blocked out the sun, so I just missed the sunset, basically. So anyways, long way to say, sorry for the dark video. I'll make sure to wait for daytime on this side of Minmus for the next landing. But we can actually show off the lovely engine lighting mod, if nothing else. I can see that that looks very nice and lights up the side of my rocket and gives me a little bit of detail there. But I don't have any landing apparatus for this particular module because it doesn't actually matter where it goes. This thing, it's entirely intended to be picked up and moved with Kerbal attachment system, so I don't really care where this goes so long as it's close. So looks like we are just now coming in, just a couple meters above the surface, and we slow it down, and I have a huge amount of fuel to kind of show that I was just BSing earlier. Basically, I have no good excuse. Okay, bonk. And bonk. Cool. Alright, so that's landed safe. Very, very nice. Now I decouple the transfer stage, the lander stage, this sky crane little dude here. And we'll just set that down pretty much right next to it so it can be torn apart for parts later on. Alright, once again, sorry about the darkness. Now we're back into the light and we are seeing the return of my commodity return module. And after fussing with this a couple times, I've actually liked to try just using stage recovery and seeing how it goes. It occurs to me that I forgot to actually, position my landing such that I'm coming down directly over the KSC, but it'll probably be okay, at least as a demonstration. I think my maximum possible return is about 1 million funds, so we'll see what we get out of this and how much more fuel we need to build into this stage of returning stuff in the future. Alright, so now I'm just kind of pointing up on the nav ball a little bit closer towards radial, away from orbit retrograde, to very precisely determine where my periapsis is going to be, because I'm going to just let stage recovery handle this recovery, I suppose, which means I just need to get this sent into the delete range above Kerbin, which is something like above 30 kilometers. In the configuration that it needs to be to survive. So that means that we just need to kick off this lander stage up top, and then kick off the docking node from the bottom, exposing just parachutes and a heat shield. So we will see how that goes when this gets into it. But for now, let's transfer back to the nuclear tug. All right, and as I launch into what is going to be another lovely 4-minute burn, let's wait for the return. So I just fire this thing up into physical time warp because I'm super not concerned about the exact thrust. So what I'm basically trying to do here is just get this into a normal height and inclination. So let's take a look. That's all right. This is it. This is the one. Hold on, let's clear out the other bits. Those are the front and back bits, but this is the one, and I only get about 500,000 funds, 38.5%. Wow! Out of 1.3 million, I only get 500,000, which is pretty unfortunate, and that's almost entirely the fuel, quote-unquote fuel, which I think is the stage recovery trying to determine what the heck those exotic minerals are. So that's a decent return, but I really needed to get that on the KSC. I way underestimated how much that was going to hurt, not bringing that all the way home. So that's good to know for the future. We will definitely not make that mistake twice. Alright, so now let's land the last bit of hardware that I had forgotten to bring over, now that it's daytime once again on the Minmus shipyards. We are bringing over the drillers that we are going to be using to pull up rare metals and silicates and something else. There's something else in there. I can't remember what it is. But it's coming down one way or the other. It's coming down fast. So we are going to be dropping this down, and this is going to get attached directly to the whole assembly line and refinery process. And that is going to be the last thing that we need before we can actually start construction. Minerals! Ha! That's what it is. I didn't just look it up. What are you talking about? So yeah, the last thing is minerals. So it's rare metals, silicates, and minerals, and that is going to be the last of the raw resources that we need to complete all of the production chains. That includes material kits, specialized parts, machinery, and colony supplies, which is the last of the big production chains. I'm not making nuclear fuel here because it's a very simple production chain that requires very large parts that I don't think is going to be any kind of issue with this particular base. I'm not going to be playing for so long that I ever run out of nuclear fuel. One thing that I found with this particular lander is that the legs will burn off if I run the jets and the lander legs at the same time. Fun! But anyways, I think that's all the time I have for this one. In the next episode, we will begin construction. And so I will see you next time.